Your dissertation is usually your last stage of your studies and gives you a chance to demonstrate your skills in collecting, analysing and forming some conclusions about your own research. There are three key aspects to a master's dissertation. Firstly, you expect your dissertation to be a piece of independent work. Of course, you'll be supported by your supervisor, but it is primarily your study. Secondly, a dissertation should be original. Original can mean original questions, or an original argument or insight into an area of concern, or originality in the methods you choose to carry out your study. Finally, a dissertation should be reflective. There will be obviously critical reflection in your findings, but we also expect you to reflect on the research process itself and discuss the problems you faced as a researcher and to identify the limitations of your study. A master's dissertation is between 15,000 and 17,000 words and is usually an empirical study. That is, you, the researcher, collect and analyse the data. The data you collect could take the form of questionnaires or interviews or observations, or maybe a documentary analysis involving reports or documents or policies. Alternatively, you may choose to do something more theoretical and do an extended review of the research on a topic, something like the meta-analysis you read in journals. A traditional master's dissertation contains 5 chapters: an introduction, a literature review, the methodology, the results, and the discussion. The aim of the introduction chapter is to set the scene in the context of your research. The chapter describes the problem or the issue you studied, and it provides a rationale for the study. For example, you would discuss why the topic is worth studying and who would benefit from your research, such as your participants or other practitioners or other researchers. The introduction also provides a formal statement of the research aim and the research questions associated with your study. The literature review firstly provides a reasonably comprehensive coverage of the theoretical concepts related to your topic. Then following that, a review of the empirical research that has examined topics similar to yours. Sometimes you may need a funneling approach to narrow down on the literature most applicable to your study. The methodology chapter is divided into 2 sections. The first section provides a critical discussion of the paradigm or approach you plan to use for your research. This section also discusses the design you have chosen, along with the assumptions associated with that design and a rationale for its use. The second section provides a detailed step-by-step guide to the methods and techniques you use to collect and analyse your data. In this section, you provide a description of the method you use to select your participants, how you access them, their numbers, a description or examples of the research instruments you use to collect your information, such as the questionnaires or the interview schedules. There also should be a section linking your research questions to your analysis methods. For example, if you're using interviews, you might talk about coding. Or if you used questionnaires, you would talk about the statistical tests that you employed. And finally, the chapter contains a discussion of the ethical issues associated with your project. The results or findings chapter present the analysis of your data. The chapter should be a narrative supported by quotes from interviews or a narrative supported by tables and figures containing statistical information. You should be able to remove all of the tables, figures and quotes, and for the most part the narrative still makes sense. This chapter, depending on your style of research, sometimes contains an interpretation of the data. However, the major interpretation and discussion usually occurs in the next chapter. The final chapter, the discussion, is perhaps the most important. It contains a discussion of the major findings of your research. When writing this chapter, it's wise to return to each of your research questions and link your findings to the literature you previously presented in Chapter 2, or sometimes you may need to introduce new literature to help you interpret your results. In the case of applied research, the last chapter also provides recommendations you wish to make to the practitioners and policymakers. This chapter also contains some reflections on the research process, such as the limitations of your study and ideas for future